So we are live. Thank you. Thank you, Administration and Council. We are now back in live session. We had no business arriving from the closed session. No motions are required. So we're now going to continue with our budget deliberations where we left off last night, which was under operating budget infrastructure section. So the next part of infrastructure, I believe there's any further discussion on infrastructure. I think there's a motion coming from myself or another councillor on infrastructure. Councillor Markgraf-Swain, you have something to suggest at this point?
Yeah, I do have a motion in this section. I wonder if administration, three motions, all in one, hopefully we can deal with.
You said three, right?
I did say three. It's all in one. That's one. It's trying to provide clear direction to administration, which I'm historically poor at. Thank you. So I'll read the motion first, and then I'll speak to it if that's okay.
Yes, please. Thank you.
So I'd like to move that funding in the amount of 80,000 from the planning reserve be added to the 2022 operating budget for undertaking a service review of processes and performance related to the land use planning, development, and engineering, and that the review addresses critical issues such as the feasibility of implementation, cost, internal and external stakeholder benefits, regulatory feasibility, resourcing, and service level timelines. And finally, that a summary report of the findings be provided to council by the end of the second quarter of 2022.
Thank you, Councillor. Please speak to your motion.
So this kind of picks up from where I was going yesterday. We had that discussion around the engineering assistant. What I heard on the campaign trail is that we're having some potential concerns around this broader process of land use planning, development, and engineering. That broader, and I'll use the word permitting, and Kendra's going to just yell at me, but because I know that's not the right word, and I'll never get the right words, which is why the motions is like this. But essentially, this is a full service review. So we've done service reviews on fire before. We've done service reviews on childcare. We've done service reviews on these things. And so what this is designed to do is to provide administration with the budget to get an external consultant to come in and essentially take a look at everything to do with this department. It allows the external folks, whether it be the home builders, whether it be the new businesses, developers, to be able to share that feedback to a third party. It allows them to go and take a look at administration, and also allows administration to come back and provide the summary of those findings back to council. When I hear about the potential challenges that are in this, I'm not naive enough to know that if we're going to ask for this, and this is what I'd ask council to consider, if we're going to ask for this report to be done, we're going to have to be recognized that there are going to be recommendations that come out of this report, and I'm hoping that it's going to come to beef up some of these areas, and council's got to think about that. Now, what this summary report will do was hopefully set out some sort of timeline. And kind of how we get to these things. It doesn't mean we're going to need to do it all the way, but I'll refer you back to, again, that fire service review where they took a detailed look at it and said, okay, this is where we need to get to in order to meet those challenges. So personally, instead of, I was trying to figure out how to have this conversation. And I think a third party to come in and do that complete full assessment is the best approach. There is precedent for this. A city in the capital region has just gone through this. And I think this is the best path forward for us. The one thing I just will quickly highlight is, the $80,000. Again, that number is not picked out of nowhere. It's based on the precedents that a similar municipality in the region has recently gone through. It gives administration the funding to do that. And then finally, that it, again, just to underscore the fact that this is coming out of the planning reserve, it's a one-time thing, and so would not impact the tax levy. So happy to answer questions on this. And I know that almost everyone here heard the challenges. And so this is a chance for us to dive, take a real deep look into it. So I'll leave it there and see if anyone else has any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Van Nieuwkerk, your green light was flashing. Do you have questions on this motion, or you have another motion of your own? Oh, you don't? Okay, thank you. We'll get back to you with your effort in this section. Councillor Tessier, you had your button on there for a second. Do you have a question on this particular motion?
Are we commenting on the motion?
Yes, now's the time. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would have to agree with this motion. It was tough turning down the position yesterday, just from hearing all that communication on the doors and neighbors and permitting, and it slows down business here in Beaumont for the developers and builders. So I'd be in favor of this motion. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Van Nieuwkerk, your question on the motion? You have the floor, please, Steve. Go ahead.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. Question for Mr. DeBlanco on the dollars and cents of this. Just wondering, what is the current amount in the planning reserve?
Through the mayor to Councillor Van Nieuwkerk, the projected opening for the planning reserve is 413,000. Projected close is 345,000.
And then secondarily, what is the optimal amount for that reserve based upon our recently completed reserve study?
Yeah. So based on the reserve policy, I believe the optimal amount is just that amount is, or that reserve does not drop below zero.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barnhart, you have a question and you have the floor now. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. And is my sound coming in okay?
It is right now, but if you start cutting out, just let you hit your video button again, okay?
Okay, we'll give it a try. Thank you very much. And I appreciate the motion and I agree with the intent of it. My question is, would this expenditure come out of, I get it comes out of the planning reserve, but when I'm looking at the infrastructure budget, is it in the infrastructure budget that would show up, or is it out of the planning budget?
Through the mayor to Councillor Barnhart, this would be part of the planning and development budget.
Okay, so this kind of covers, I understand the land use planning part of it. So this review would actually be broader than one department, but the expenses would come out of planning. Is that how it goes?
Yes, that would be correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have a question myself, if I may. Mr. Lewicki, last evening, if you mind joining us, please, if you don't mind, maybe easier. You haven't got a microphone. I forgot about that. Sorry. Thanks. Thank you. Last night's discussions revolved around the adequacy of that position and the timing of it. And council decided to not fulfill that position. And we had a good discussion with you last night about this. There was a review already being somewhat conducted already, and you felt that review would still recommend that position being fulfilled. And I get that totally. This motion now talks about, which I am leaning towards favoring for the right reasons, is going to be a third-party survey, which I like the idea of our report, which I like the idea of doing that. Is there much redundancy in this new report going to happen from what's already been done by the department? Or I do understand the logic of this and I understand the reasoning for it. I think it's the right thing to do, but I just want to get an idea of your feelings on how much work's already been done that can be put towards that report, or will be starting from fresh?
Well, thank you, Mayor. I believe this is a good approach. The review that we've done internally would not be duplication of this. I think this is in much more depth. Okay. I believe that this type of activity will really allow us to get to the bottom of what we need in this area. So I'm in support of this direction, and I think that I do think it will still support what we were asking for, but I'm curious to see. I believe that it will actually show that we need more development officer support as well. I'll be honest, the ask was kind of to support keeping things together and trying to get us where we need to go. But I do think this will help us to identify our future needs and where we need to go to build further. So I'm definitely in support of the motion. So thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you. Maybe just say the case we have another
Yep.
question, if you don't mind. Councilman Newkirk, followed by Councilor McCook. So Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, sorry, just to further hone in, Mr. DeBlanco, I believe I found the numbers that you were looking at. So the projected close at 345,000 is all things being told in the current budget. If we funded 85, it would be 345 less the 85. Is that correct?
Through the mayor to Councilor Van Newkirk, I believe the motion is for 80,000, but yes.
Yeah. So it would be, the projected close is 345. Less the 80 would be where the adjusted projected close would be.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good. You did the math in my head for me. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. Councilor McCook, you have the floor. Go ahead, Catherine. Oh, sorry, hit the screen there. You're down.
Thank you, Mayor
Thanks.
Donald. Mine's more just a comment. I'm also not really a fan of just Band-Aid fixes. I think, you know, when we're talking about big departments like infrastructure and planning and development, you guys are such integral pieces to our city. So looking at the broader picture as to how we can assist you guys and make sure that we are making the best decisions moving forward is a good idea. Even I know we had a survey out recently about some CEPTED initiatives, which is crime prevention through environmental design for, I guess, those who aren't aware, but we're talking about safety in our community and stuff, and just having some of those pieces connect moving forward, I think is really crucial, because then we're looking at taking care of the city holistically and not just having one department working here and one department working there. So I'm in favor of this to see what you guys truly need and to hopefully get you there.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate your joining us for a moment there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions from council, I will call for the vote on the motion. Councilor Barnhart, your vote verbally, please.
Yes, in favor.
Thank you. Steve? Oh, there it is now. Sorry. Thank you. That passed unanimously 7-0. Thank you, council. Much appreciated. And I appreciate the motion from my fellow councillor. And I want to commend administration for being very quick to help out drafting that idea today. And we're thinking it through and being nimble and receptive to new ideas is much appreciated. So let's move on to the next part of infrastructure. Are there any further motions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Manuker. I know you're going to be next. So you have the floor, Steve.
Yeah, just a question on some clarification here on municipal operating versus capital. So when I read the preamble here, it says the infrastructure department is responsible for blah, 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 including roads, sidewalks, paths, and city-owned buildings. So the operating is responsible for the paths. But if you were to repair a path, is it under the operating budget? And if you were to build a new path, is it under the capital? Can you just explain to me where the funding comes from if a new hunk of path is asked for?
Yeah. So through the mayor to Councilor Van Newkirk, if it's a new capital ask and it's subject to whatever our capital threshold is, sometimes that's a dollar amount, sometimes that's new. When we're talking about renewal, that's basically tearing a path up and rebuilding it. That would also be capital. But when we're talking about the ongoing repair and maintenance, that would be appearing in the operating budget.
So if there was a path that came to here, stopped, but continued 200 meters later, if we were to build that piece in between, that's capital.
That's correct.
Okay. Second question.
Please proceed.
Yeah. So one of the continual challenges we have in this room is the technology, the AV, the video, sound, and the overall user experience, the external user experience as well. If there were a motion put forward to improve the council experience for users, would that fall under infrastructure, or should that have been under the technology group, or where would that come through?
Once again, kind of depending on the dollar amount and whether it's equipment oriented, it could be either. There could be components of each, but if it's a large purchase of equipment, then we would be looking at capital budget, particularly in the technology replacement, if we're looking at a replacement.
Okay, Mayor, I'm trying to figure out if I should continue asking the question about improving this room now, or if I should hold off until the capital. Maybe just ask administration what they believe is the best timing for these continued questions on this room, the equipment, and improving.
Okay, Ms. Bajia?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Van Newkirk. One suggestion I might make for your consideration is often when you're looking at making that kind of improvement, it might be helpful to direct administration to conduct a study and come back with options and cost feasibility. Because sometimes when you're thinking about making technology improvements, and I've been through this a few times, there are physical limitations like the size of the desks. Which would result in more significant costs when you get to, well, we need to increase the size of the desk, or we need to change certain pieces of technology, or we might be able to utilize a different system that we have available to us. So depending on the problem we're trying to solve, it might be, as a first step, helpful to direct administration to go away, come back with a list of options or recommendations for improving the user experience. We could certainly help you draft something along those lines. And then if there is costing to that, there's always the ability to make a budget amendment at any point in the cycle. So it's just something to consider.
Yeah, thank you. And I understand it's easier to do that because then you can develop some parameters and put some costing forward. But my goal would be to allocate money in this budget to do something. So I guess just back to my original question for administration, is it appropriate to have conversation about improving cameras, audio, software, stuff that we use in this room that often doesn't work or isn't working as well as it should? Is it appropriate to have that conversation now in the operating, or should I save it for capital?
I would suggest probably better in capital, just based on that brief synopsis. I think what you're talking about is probably either replacement or purchase of new equipment, which there is a capital project for that.
Perfect. Thank you for letting me know.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further comments, motions, or concerns on infrastructure before I believe I have one coming up for chat in a moment here? If you could, Ms. Winter, my infrastructure one regarding the transit. Thank you, please. While that's coming up, Council, this refers to the phasing of transit in the amount of 165,300. You will recall that last year we paid for that out of reserves to help Council get to a zero increase budget last year. Sometimes zero is a good thing, not on a consistent basis, and I do appreciate that. One of our fellow municipalities did zero increase 5-6 years in a row, and all of a sudden they hit 17% in 1 year. That's not our philosophy here. Sometimes zero is a good thing, and when we can do it, it's a great thing. Last year, doing this helped us get to zero, and it's good for our citizens. At the same time, it's now come back to us again. Mr. DeBlanco, for my purposes of clarity, would you mind just letting us know if we did do it from reserve again? I'm not saying we should, but sorry, should I make my motion first? But I'm already discussed my own motion, aren't I? I just saw it on the screen now. So let me make my motion first. Sorry, I apologize. That one-time funding in the amount of $165,000 for 2022 transit service be allocated from the financial stabilization reserve. That's my motion. Would you please speak to the financial implications of doing it this year as I did last year versus paying it outright? Thank you, Mr. DeBlanco.
Sure. Thank you for the question. So when looking at allocating one-time funding from the reserve to fund transit for an additional year, what's occurring is we're using a one-time funding source to fund an ongoing service. So the implications will be that this amount will show up in next year's budget as well. We're, once again, pulling from savings reserves to pay for ongoing costs. History was the 4 years there was a decreasing reserve transfer to phase in the transit service. At the time, council had intended to have it fully funded by the tax levy by 2021. Once again, you alluded to the occurrence last year. And so it's brought forward this year as again for consideration as an impact to the tax levy. If it was funded from reserve this year again, it would then show up again next year.
Thank you for clarifying. So I'll open up to questions from council on this. Kathy, go ahead, please. Councilor Barnhart, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. First question is the amount in the, on page 14 is 165,300. I know that's not terribly significant, but I just wonder if there was an intention to include the whole amount, Mayor?
Thank you. So I'll amend the motion to say 165,300, please. Thank you very much for catching that.
I have a subsequent comment, if I may. Mr. DeBlanco, I'm just wondering, when you say that this will appear again next year, I was under the impression that we were moving to the Regional Transit Commission and that we would be changing our funding to accomplish that. Would this not roll into that in some way, so it would not be exactly the same line item that we would be funding?
Through the mayor to Councillor Barnhart, the two are unrelated. We're talking about a service that Beaumont provides, and then we're also talking about the funding source. So the funding source for an ongoing service is in best practice through ongoing revenue, either through transit fares or the tax levy. So the regional transit, which would come on next year, is still going to have costs that need to have a funding source. So the two are not connected.
Maybe I'm just not phrasing my question properly, but my understanding is that the transit service we would be providing would become part of the regional transit system, and that we wouldn't be having our own transit and then a regional transit, that they'd be one and the same. Perhaps I need some clarification on that.
I can probably help. Mr. Blanco, if you want to go ahead, I can probably help you with that too, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Once again, I'll just reiterate that what we're talking about is the funding source for a service rather than the type of service that's being delivered. So it's a transit service requires funding, and we're talking about funding it with an ongoing revenue.
I understand what you mean, but I'm looking at it from the point of view of the amount of money coming out of the tax levy versus a one-time expenditure. If I can give you my rationale, it would be far easier to explain this to residents in terms of the tax levy implications if the transit service was connecting to the region. And we've had difficulty keeping our own Beaumont Transit providing as much service as we'd like it to provide because of some of its limitations. So I just find that, putting in another year as a one-time expenditure makes sense to me until we can get the regional service up and running. So that's my explanation for supporting what the mayor is suggesting here. But thank you.
But my understanding, Mr. Blanco, if I'm wrong, and perhaps Sammy will help me in this too, is that this expenditure was a 4-year anticipation to be done in 2021 from what the previous council had put the Beaumont's transit system into place. It was over a 4-year to pay for it basically. And the 4th year was 2021. Council last year said rather than do a tax increase for the 165, we paid out of reserves instead, but that still has to be paid. It's a one-time thing. If we defer it again this year, it'll come back next year, but if we pay for it this year, then it's done. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Councilor Swain, you have a comment on the transit, and then we'll go to Councilor Van Newkirk. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, the one thing I just want to correct is the service to move into the regional transit system will not be happening in 2022. It'll be happening in 2023. So more on that to come. Even more reason to support this motion here. As we still have the work at home order. Who knows how long that is? Our transit system is clearly not. We don't have the same amount of folks on that bus every day due to the work at home order. So I am supportive of that. I just wanted to clarify that we're not looking to move into the regional transit system. I know what Curtis is saying, that doesn't matter which service we're in, they're still looking at where do we fund that from. But I just wanted to clarify to Councillor Barnhart's question there.
Mayor, could I ask a further question?
Yes.
Sorry. You, in your comment, Mayor, you just said that once we pay this 165.3, then it's done. And I'm hearing Mr. DeBlanco say that it's going to be ongoing after that. That those two statements do not make sense to me.
Mr. Blanco, can you clarify if I said something incorrectly? I thought I had stated it correctly, but please clarify.
So just to clarify, once there are no more reserve transfers, the service is then funded from ongoing revenue sources, be it transit fares or tax levy, and there is no longer a one-time funding source to fund an ongoing service.
So we currently transit roughly 400K a year.
Mhm.
We subsidize a little bit of that right now, 165. You're looking to have that little bit come in, but once we get rid of the using the stabilization reserve, then that full is paid for through either revenue of ridership or through the tax levy. So it's not a one-time capital cost to pay off a little bit of a bus. It's what it costs us 400K roughly a
Each
year to do that. So that's it's not a we do it once and then it's done. It'll be all into the tax roll. But I think my argument behind this is we've got one more, maybe this is knock on wood. I'm hoping we have, this is our last year where we have these work at home orders that are still in place. And when we get the ridership up in 2023, when we're able to get into that regional transit, that I think that's an appropriate time to put the full cost back onto the tax levy, subsidized by obviously the paying ridership. So
You're in favor of using reserve?
yeah. If I could summarize my drivel there, yes, I am supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Newkirk, you had your light on. Did you take it off? Okay, sorry, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the question. If you're in favor of allocating from the reserve as opposed to paying from the tax levy. Councilor Barnhart, your vote, please.
In favor.
In favor, thank you. Council has all voted. I'm seeing unanimously 7-0 in favor of the motion. Thank you, council. Are there any further discussion on infrastructure in the operating budget? Seeing none, we can actually move on to the next section. Thank you very much, council and administration. We're now on to planning and development. Give me 1 second to advance my screen here. So on the agenda package, page 76, hard copy is page, oh, I jumped ahead there. Page 68. Any comments or questions or motions from council in the planning development portion of operating budget? Councilman Newkirk, you have the floor. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, through you to administration. Just wanted to talk about two of the budget highlights for 2022, or actually not talk about, ask questions. I was curious on the creation of a planning and development cost recovery model. If you could expand on what you're thinking and what the goal of that would look like and the intent, please and thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So one of the things that we have on the plate for 2022 is to do a comprehensive fee review, looking at our planning and development and engineering fees, and then creating a cost recovery model where growth pays for growth or closer to that, and working through those fee structure right now. Because right now, I think we have an unequal fee model at this point, but we need to get a better handle on costs and what our outputs are. So,
second question.
Please proceed.
Yeah, just wondering on the second bullet point on the urban agricultural master plan, just what the intended timing in 2022 would be on that, if you know.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Van Newkirk. The timing on the urban agriculture master plan is actually to be done in 2023. It is going to take us over 2022 and into 2023.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Markov Swain, you have the floor, Sam.
Thank you, and I hope I'm not repeating your questions. Mine's around SIPTIDs, or were you down that theme? Was that completely different? Sorry, I was trying to get my motions ready. No one's listened to it on. That's perfect. We'll just go. So I just wanted to highlight one of the priority initiatives that you've got in here around the crime prevention through environmental design guidelines. Councillor McCook touched on those before, and Councillor Miller and I got a sneak preview at the Youth Council earlier this week, and very, very excited around that. During the campaign, a lot of people came up and spoke around the need for lights on trails and all that sort of stuff to feel safe in the community. And I was excited to see this in here. Initially, before I read this, I was coming in here to see if we could get some funding in the capital budget or to be able to do something like this. But I don't want to get ahead of the work that you guys are doing. Instead of me just throwing something, I'd rather let you guys do the work and come back and provide those recommendations back to council. So I've got two quick questions on that. One is, when do you expect to have that report back to council around SIPTID?
Through your worship to Councillor Monkoff-Swain, we envision having that back by summer of 2022.
Perfect. And then the quick follow-up question is, that's focused on design guidelines, and I would imagine that the priority is on newer neighborhoods, so that we can design neighborhoods to follow these important guidelines. Would there be an opportunity when that comes back for discussion to look at some of our existing neighborhoods and some areas where we think we could invest some capital dollars in there to improve the livability of those trails?
Through your worship to Councillor Monkoff-Swain, certainly while the guidelines are going to focus on new development and new parks, they're definitely applicable to existing parks and existing neighborhoods and can be retrofitted at that point as well.
Okay, thank you. So I won't talk about this further in capital, and I'm looking forward to seeing that come back, and I'm really excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Newkirk. Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Monkoff-Swain's questions made me think of something around that as well. And looking at the older neighborhoods, I think it's going to be very important, like you said, you're focusing on the new builds, but it's going to be very, very important to look back and figure out where in the municipality some of these new ideas, I guess, could be input. And one of the things I would say is that it's going to be very, very critical to engage the public on that, to learn where they're going and where some of the most opportune places may be. Just you really want to make sure there's not a disconnect between the map and who is using what where. So the getting in touch and doing the actual public engagement on that is going to be very crucial. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Give me 1 second here. Any further discussion, questions, or any motions coming forward on planning development?
Mayor, I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Barnhart, please proceed.
The question is regarding any kind of opportunities we may have in this budget to increase citizen awareness, residents' awareness of the changes made to the land use bylaw and some of the planning language we use, and just general.
Is that more of a communications
I
question?
call it Planning 101. I brought up during well, is it a communication if it's about planning? That's my question. Is there anything built into this budget that would be part and parcel of what the staff in this department do?
Ms. Raymond?
Through your worship to Councillor Barnhart, yes, that is actually one of the items that we have on our list for 2022 would be to do more public awareness regarding the land use bylaw. And that's part of our implementation and ongoing monitoring as well. So that is included in our work plan for 2022.
Thank you. See no further questions? Is there any further?
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. Or sorry, Kathy. Looking at Catherine, saying Kathy, sorry. Okay, see no further discussion or any motion on planning development. We'll consider this section of operating budget closed. Moving on to next section, which is going to be protective services. And give me a second to advance my screen. On your online budget, page 78, Hard copy is page 70 and 71. All right, we'll begin with any questions or concerns or motions from council on protective services. Councillor Tessier, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move a motion if no rush there, Shalane, so. Yeah. No, it's okay. Thank you very much. I would like to move that the 2 unfunded RCMP additional strength positions be added to the 2022 operating budget. This is something I'm really passionate about and a big reason why I ran for council, just the safety of our residents. These 2 positions, if funded, would bring the city of Beaumont's police force to a full 24-hour service. From campaigning and meeting new residents in our city, it was shocking when they heard that they moved to a city and we weren't covered 24 hours a day. This is something that's really important to our residents along with ourselves. And it might not happen often when you have to call the police, but when you do and there's a delayed response, it's shocking, right? It's something we don't want to have happening. So we have an opportunity here as council right now to get a 24-hour police service in the city of Beaumont. I'm sure we all heard it at the doors that our services are lacking. This is one step forward that we can ensure that happens. If we always take a reactive approach to services, it's too late. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Other councillors have questions on this particular motion in front of us? Councillor Monkoff Swain, you have the floor, please.
Yeah, I wonder if Staff Sergeant, do you mind?
Director Melvin, you're okay if we have a Staff Sergeant answer the question directly? Thank you.
Sorry about that. Process, not my thing. So first, let me just clarify a comment in the motion that we don't have 24-hour coverage. We do. Let me just ask a simple question. Where does Beaumont rank in the crime prevention index in the province of Alberta?
The crime severity index is if we're talking about that, I think we're way below 50 right now. And the average for that is the guideline is 100. So we're one of the safest communities in Beaumont or in Alberta.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think Staff Sergeant, I think we're good right now. We'll have you sit back your seat if you don't mind, please. Thank you. Council will try and if we can debate the topic, though, trying to pull staff in if we can avoid that. If we can, we'll try and debate it amongst ourselves if we could, unless we need technical advice. Thank you. Councilor McCook, you have the floor.
I had questions for Staff Sergeant.
Yes, please.
Is that okay? If
Yeah.
I ask?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, no question for you.
Oh, I thought you meant for Jay. I apologize.
Sorry.
Staff Sergeant, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Sorry, can you just clarify, since we have seen a reduction in crime and everything, what would be your biggest concern in our community?
Well, overall, I think everybody is doing their part. Even with policing, I would talk about protective services altogether, is that when we're working with our community peace officers and us, we're trying to do the best that we can. The biggest thing right now is the increase in population also, and the priority calls that sometimes we do end up getting where there's more than one priority call to attend by the membership that we have.
Thank you. Thank you. That's it for questions. I guess my discussion on the motion would be, I think we've seen some additional calls and issues surrounding mental health and stuff like that. I think Sergeant Dhaliwal and his and everyone here has done a really great job in reducing crime in our community and working with the resources they have, and in doing a lot of proactive policing in our community, which has been really great to see. So as we've seen through our budget, I think some of our concerns are surrounding some of the fire concerns and things like that. So I'm just not quite sure I'm there yet in regards to funding these positions as a priority in this budget. I do see that it is something that we do need, and we do need to get there at some point. But I think we have some mitigating priorities to ensure the safety of our residents. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Van Newkirk, you have the floor. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. A question through you, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Daniluk. I'm stumbling around here.
It's okay.
Through you, Mayor Daniluk, to administration. Just again, Mr. DeBlanco, could you share with us what the % impact to the tax roll would be should these positions be funded, please? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Through the mayor to Councillor Daniluk. I believe I know what you're asking. So specifically on this motion, the impact to taxes would be 1.64%.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, and for me to, I'll speak to this a little bit as well. Councillor Monkoff-Swain went where I was going to go about Beaumont. I believe Beaumont was, the safest community in Alberta, as ranked in a magazine earlier this year. We're fresh off of a police review where there was, there's always cause for concern in a community, but at the same time, there was a lot of good news stories around, a continual increase of the officer complement that has happened year over year over year. There has been community policing visibility increases that have been noticed by residents. We have officers in the community in places where they haven't been seen in years, and that's just anecdotal from walking miles and miles in the community. We have our speeding hotspots in Beaumont, and I encourage people to reach out to the appropriate phone numbers to call those in. But when it comes to the actual cause for concern and the alarm bells ringing around prioritizing a 1.645% increase in policing to achieve something that we all want to do now versus all of the other competing priorities that are in front of us. I'm not quite sure I'm there. So looking forward to a little more discussion on this motion to round up my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate that. Councillor Miller, do you have the floor? Go ahead, Ashley.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. So thank you for coming in and sitting here with all of our questions. My first question before my comment on this motion, when it comes to hiring these two new members, how will that impact issues such as speeding and throughout the day? Will that increase the service to those types of calls and the patrol on those issues? If you could just explain or touch on that a little bit.
Thank you very much. Your worship, through you to Councillor Miller. So what we're looking here is that, yes, we have an on-call period. There's 24-hour policing service in Beaumont. How it increases the speed and all that kind of stuff is because we have a number of hours that everybody can work according to the labor code. So we would have 4 teams, 24 hours in presence in Beaumont at the time. So it would increase it by, I'm not going to say a lot, it may increase it by a little bit because you're still going to have 2 to 3 members on per team. Right now, we just don't have the number of members to make 4 teams out of that to have that 24-hour coverage, if that makes sense. So then what we do with the 4 teams as well is, like I've said before, is work with the community peace officers to do those traffic enhancement projects, because when we're getting the complaints through the public, through council or administration, and the complaints that the CPOs are getting as well for traffic services, that's when we coordinate our efforts to be in those hotspots.
Okay. So I guess overall, we can, as residents, expect to see an increase in service when it comes to those issues.
The increase in service where that would be is there's 1 additional member on per day So that would be increasing the service into the community as well. So if there's nobody off on leave or on training, then you get the maximum of our full team. So
Right.
that increases that service.
Right.
By adding one more extra person on per day.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you for that. That's very helpful. I have to say, I don't personally believe in waiting for something to necessarily be broken to fix it. I think we have a good momentum here. We are one of the safest communities. That's wonderful. And I campaigned on being more proactive rather than reactive. So I actually am leaning to be more supportive of this motion because I believe that it's when I prioritize things in my head, safety, policing for our residents is one of my top priorities. So that being said, I'm leaning towards supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller, Councillor Tessier, followed by Councillor McGough-Swain, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk. And then I see Kathy's waving her hand. So actually, Kathy, I'll put you in the queue before now, if you don't mind. She has been waiting patiently. You've all had a chance to speak once. So I'm going to have Councillor Barnard speak first, then back to Councillor Tessier. I'll put your mic on when I need to, okay? Thank you. Councillor Barnhart, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Lots has been said already, and I think that what's going through my mind and what I believe is that we live in a very safe community, and that's not by accident. There's been a lot of really good work done. I happen to be a fan of increasing our safety through crime prevention, through social development, which we're doing quite a bit, and we're increasing in that regard in this budget as well as the crime prevention through environmental design. Those are two ways that we are preventing crime in our community. And in addition, we have an RCMP that's working very well, and the proactive nature and the community connection and engagement that Staff Sergeant Dhaliwal has been talking about and lives and breathes and does very well, I think has made Beaumont a very safe community, as seen by some of the comments that Councillor McGough-Swain made as well. We're doing very well and we're noticed for that. Sure, we can always be better, but when I also look at this year's budget and see that we have increased costs due to the RCMP contract, as well as increases to the RCMP's quarters where they're residing, the renovations that are happening there. I feel that that's quite an investment in the RCMP this year. And so for that reason, I won't be funding these two unfunded positions this year. I'll be voting against that motion, not because I don't see it as important, but because I think we are doing well. We always can do better, but I think at this point, I'm comfortable with where we are right now. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tessier, I'm back to you now, please, in the order.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. Just a couple questions. Do you believe you have any officer burnout due to the increased overtime?
Your worship, through you to Councillor Tessier. Sir, that's always a concern for member wellness as well. Sometimes it's not, the overtime doesn't come from internal members for some reasons or personal commitments as well. And then we do fan it out to the surrounding detachments to get policing members to work here on overtime.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And one question for Mr. DeBlanco. So 1.64%, what does that work out in a dollar value per month for the average household? Sorry to put you on the spot, but I'll talk a little bit on it. So most of you know that I ran pretty hard on this subject, and every person I talked to, I personally hit 3,500 homes, and I sold this like it was now it is my part-time job. In saying that, I asked everyone, would you be okay with spending $20, $30 extra to get that extra service? I didn't hear one person say no. So I'm really interested to hear what that cost is. I said, yeah, if it's $200 a month, that doesn't make sense to me either. But the last thing you want to do is have to call someone and no one shows up for 20, 30 minutes. So I'll just wait for Mr. DeBlanco there. And sorry to put you on the spot, sir.
Not a problem. Just double checking the math here. Sorry. So through the mayor to Councillor Tessier, 1.64 would be approximately, $50 per year.
$50 per year.
Which approximately $4.11 a month.
Thank you. So $4.11. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tessier. Councillor Van Nieuwkerk, followed by Councillor McGough-Swain. Then I have some comments myself and some questions I want to get to. Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, just a couple of points. First one being a question and then an affirmation of something I believe to be true. Just wondering if you can comment on any of the year-over-year trends in calls during the on-call hours experienced in Beaumont. Have those trends been increasing or decreasing? What are you able to share anything with us regarding that or numbers?
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Van Nieuwkerk. Sir, the calls vary during that time. There's persons crime like assaults that have occurred. There's mischief to property, theft from motor vehicle, theft of motor vehicle. There's also suspicious activity as in trespass by night, people going through people's yards as well. And just other calls where it could be just somebody walking by, it could be suspicious to that individual as well, right? For their safety, because we're out engaging the public to say, if you notice something suspicious, and every neighbor and every community member knows their neighbors and their backyard. So those are the kind of calls that we're getting at that time. As I've said before, is that we do have a risk manager at our communication center. They look at a matrix and say, and make that judgment call, should we call somebody out or not at that time? And so there are steps taken, but those are normally the calling type of calls that we get.
Are there any trends in the numerical numbers over the last few years? Has there been a trend up in numbers or down in numbers of calls during those on-call hours? What does that look like? Are you able to share any of that?
Yes, sir, I can. More of it is, so right now, suspicious. If you're looking for a specific number, I don't have that, but the type of calls that we're getting are that, but also more in regards to the vehicles, because we've had increase in catalytic converters, and it takes our offenders less than sometimes 30 seconds to do that. And so by the time you're out noticing something, they've come and they've gone, and sometimes you don't even realize that's what's happening. So if to categorize it, it would be more property crime related.
Okay, just a comment to something that was said earlier. I believe that, you know, should this be supported and 2 officers be funded and added to the complement, just to be clear, that doesn't make an officer appear at your place of need faster. You know, the 2 officers would add to the officer complement. And if they're busy doing something else when the call comes, they're still busy doing something else when the call comes, right? So adding 2 officers doesn't necessarily equate to a faster response time. I believe what I heard is that it closes the gap on-call hours. Is that a true thought?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the comment. It does depend on calls for service, what is happening during whatever time it is. It doesn't matter if it's on call or if it's not on call. And because even if you have 2 or 3 members that are, let's say we have 4 members here working, they could be tied up 2 priority calls and a 3rd call comes in as well. So that's where the prioritizing comes in to, and the risk assessment comes into the public and to policing as well. So even if you have people working, it could be a delay of 30 minutes to get there, or it could be even a little bit longer, depending on if it's property crime, what it is on the risk assessment and the prioritization.
Yeah, so to be clear, adding 2 officers to the mix does not one-on-one equate to a faster response time to your need. It could, but it doesn't. There's no direct correlation to that.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, it's very hard to comment on that question just for calls of service. And so for me to say, yes, it does, or no, it doesn't, I can't actually say that, because if we have 2 members and there's only 1 call for service, and if somebody else, there's another call that comes in, that person could be there in 30 minutes, depending on the call, or sorry, in 3 minutes, or it could be 30 minutes, depending on the call as well. Yep. So even if we had 10 members here dealing with, we've had emergency response team come here where we get tied up, and we also get resources from Leduc detachment to assist us as well. So that's why I say it depends on the call and the calls for service at that in time.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly my point, is that whether we had 1 or 4 more officers, depending on what's going on in the community at that time, that's going to affect response time. So, one doesn't lead to the other. So, okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Counselor. We'll try and keep our answers to a little shorter if we can. We're in the interest of time and debate in general. Thank you.
Yeah.
Counselor Monkoff-Swain, followed by Counselor Miller, then followed by me. Counselor Van.
Simple question, maybe a tough answer for Councillor Tessier, and then I'll close with my argument here. I'll keep it tight. What problem are you trying to solve with this?
Oh, sorry, Renee, go ahead.
It's all good.
Pardon me.
Through Mayor Daniluk to Councillor Munkoff, same. Great question. The main problem is if you're going to call the police and they're not going to come for 30 minutes, that problem could be devastating. So I've heard stories from different residents in that situation. Not a good feeling at all. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so let me close up, if
Okay.
that's okay.
Yeah, then I'll move on to, yes, please proceed.
So, clearly this is an emotional issue. I think, to make those statements, call someone, no one show up, I think that's misleading and potentially dangerous. There is 24-hour policing in Beaumont. We just heard the answer that it's not whether you've got 24-hour policing in here in Beaumont. There could be 3 other things that they're responding to. So what I constantly hear and have heard for the last 4 years I've been on council, and again reiterated here, that we are either the safest or one of the top safest communities in Alberta. So I don't see a problem there. I also saw a report from me around our fire service saying we are well below, maybe not well below, I apologize for that. We are below the guidelines there. So if you want to talk about $4 a month, for $4 a month, you could get 3.5 firefighters to beef up that piece. So when we're looking at this, when I'm looking at this, would I like 24-hour here in Beaumont? Sure, of course I would. But when I'm looking at the broader program, I think there are much greater needs, whether it be through social improvements, whether it be through our fire service. There are much more pressing needs. We're a safe community. The detachment does a great job keeping us safe. And I think if we're prepared to look at $360,000 additional further, I think there are much better areas. So I won't be supporting the motion. I do appreciate the conversation because you're absolutely right. The community did ask for it. So thank you for bringing it forward. And I'm glad that we're able to debate this, but I won't be supporting this. I just think there's much greater needs in the community for me. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Miller. Ashley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And in closing my comment here, just to kind of touch on what Councillor Van Nieuwenkerk said, whether or not the response time is increased, I personally feel that by adding these 2 new members is never going to go in the backwards. When Councillor Tessier talks about the 30-minute response time or whatever it may be, I feel like this can only benefit and bridge that gap. So you may not have and be able to specifically answer that, as you said, you really can't say, but it's only going to increase the service to the residents of Beaumont. As I said, I believe in being more proactive rather than reactive. I will be supporting this motion. I feel like it's important. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. I have the floor now. So I have a couple of quick questions. I hope would appreciate the short answers, only to keep it in the sake of brevity. Counselor Tessier makes a very strong point. I campaigned on having us to have full-time in Beaumont policing at some point in the future when 2 things happen. It's fiscally responsible for Beaumont's taxpayers, and RSB can supply the manpower to do it. Manpower has taken the past 18, 24 months to give an RCMP officer on the ground, boots on the ground. If we pass this motion, can you guarantee to us that we'll have 2 officers to support this motion that we're raising taxes for in 2022? Can you guarantee that?
Your worship, my experience within the RCMP I've been in different, over 10 different units. My experience is 6 months to a year, we can have boots on the ground here. We are looking
Okay.
at experienced members that can come over within 30 days, 90 days.
Mhm.
But right now, the way the economy is, I want to make sure that I do comment on this, is house sales from where in the past, the commander, it took 2 years to actually sell his house from Saskatchewan.
Okay.
And so that's all I'd like to say on that.
Right, so you can't guarantee it, but you're confident they can come. I appreciate the honesty of that, but based on my experience, the RCMP delivering personnel here, I can't see it happening in 12 months. Honestly, I can't. If it did, that'd be great. I'm also leaning towards the fact that Councillor Tessier, and I mean respectfully, you kind of played the safety card. Take 3 minutes, have a police in response to a phone call. I get that, I understand your perspective, and I support the concept of having quick response time. I respect that. However, I know our fire department cannot get to a fire in 10 minutes, 9 times out of 10. That's 10 minutes, not 30. So if a structure fire happens in Beaumont and someone's in threat of burning to death, our guys can't get there. Sorry, our guys and girls can't get there in 10 minutes, 9 times out of 10. So to Councilman Swain's point a minute ago, $360,000 gives us almost 4 full-time firefighters. Safety is important. Police safety is important, but so is fire protective services. And my position has been, when it's fiscally responsible to get to full-time policing, I support it. Right now, we're safe. I do see us having full-time in Beaumont policing in the future, but right now, I firmly believe our fire protective services are much more important right now to spend money on new boots on the ground to get us to 90% of the 10-minute response time on fire. So I respect your safety angle, and I totally respect it. We're on the same page on that. Believe me, we are. But right now, I'm in favor of protective services. So having fire protective services on spending more money. So I'm not be supporting the motion at this point, although I do believe in full-time policing in Beaumont. We'll get there, but not this fiscal year, in my personal opinion. All right, seeing no further questions on this particular motion, thank you, Staff Sergeant, for joining us this evening. Director Melvin, did you have anything to add to this discussion regarding full-time policing? I want to give you the opportunity in case you wanted to say something. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I just did, so. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, one question, Director.
Mr. Tessie, you have the floor.
Can you confirm on the number of firefighters it would take to go 24 hours?
I do not have that data in front of me right now, Councilor.
All good, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Council, I appreciate the spirited debate on this emotional issue. Safety is important for all of us, and no matter how the vote goes, I want anybody out there to think that none of the chiefs on council do not endorse safety. So it's an emotional issue. Let's make that very clear. So having said that, I will call for the vote. Councillor Barnhart, would you mind, just for the record, please stating your vote, please?
Yes, Mayor, I am opposed to this motion.
Thank you. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes for no, 2 votes for yes. The motion is defeated. Councillors Tessier and Miller voted yes. The balance voted no. Thank you, Council. And I do appreciate, as I mentioned a moment ago, the debate was spirited, informative, and most of all, important to the safety of our citizens. So I do appreciate your debate on this. 6:45, I think we have coming, is refreshments are here now? Okay. Sorry? Okay, well, actually, we're not. We have recreation yet to do after protective services for operating, so. I will declare a 10-minute recess, please, to have refreshments. And please, let's be prompt if we can. Let's be back. We have not. That is correct. We have not finished protective services. I'm calling a 10-minute recess, and let's be prompt and briefly back to our chairs, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.